Story 1. There's a man in his 50s at work who's very much the class clown. Very good for morale, but he can come across as a little childish at times. One of the first shifts back after my dad died, he sat down with me for our whole lunch break and very respectfully asked questions about who my dad was as a person and the life that he had, as well as speaking about his own struggles when his mom died. For weeks afterwards, he'd sneak a little shoulder pat or say some words of encouragement to help me while I was struggling. I realized he acts how he does normally because he genuinely cares about the people around him and he wants to lift their spirits when he can. Some of the younger guys and I go fishing with him now, and he barely fishes. He'd much rather pass on any knowledge he has to the inexperienced guys, talk absolute nonsense, and cook up a big feast to make sure we are all well fed. Story 2. When I realized my father wasn't mean, he's just incompetent. It's not that he didn't love me or appreciate me, it's just that he genuinely has no idea how to love anyone. It's followed him in all of his subsequent relationships with people, and his friends are merely acquaintances that he gets laughs from occasionally, not particularly meaningful because he just isn't that guy. I can now see him as a whole person in my 30s, and while he's just as useless as a grandparent, it really helped heal my inner child to know it wasn't just me. Story 3. When he died, my best friend and business partner of 15 years passed away, and his wife found out everything. He wasn't using his real name, never went to university, never played sports, despite wearing a jersey with his name on it, claimed his parents were both dead when he actually had a father alive in a different state, lied about working while he was embezzling from me, and stole his wife's retirement savings, all while having 3 side girlfriends. I could write a book of stories, but I will stop at the highlights. We all knew he had an ego, but we never knew he was a pathological liar and a sociopath, most likely a psychopath. It's a Dateline NBC special, to say the least. Story 4. I did a stress management and mental health course at university, and several people I looked up to attended too. Those I thought had their lives together and were popular. Most of their insecurities matched mine pretty closely, and that was an eye-opening moment for me. Logically, everyone has their own issues, but that was the point I really realized it. That, and talking to some of my friends about suicidal thoughts and realizing they struggled with them as well. I still struggle with anxiety. Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and autism don't help, but I try to remember that those thoughts are human. They don't make me fundamentally broken, even if I need some help to get better. Story 5. When I realized the person I was in a relationship with was actually the potential version of him and not who he really was, that was my fault, really. He showed me who he was through his actions many times, but I wanted to believe his words more, so I let myself stay involved. I finally fully internalized the reality of the situation and left. He wasn't a bad person, just also not who I thought he was. Story 6. When he talked about his friendship scorecard in Excel, anyone under 80 points gets removed from his friend list. Of course, I wasn't on the list, sure. Story 7. My best guy friend. My house burned down, and I was so overwhelmed I tried to call him. I texted him to tell him what happened, and he just replied, "That sucks." Time passes, and I ask him if everything is okay between us because he's been so distant, which is unlike him. The very first thing he ever said was, "You having a heart-to-heart with me makes me never want to talk to you again." That one killed me the most. I haven't heard from him since. It makes me cry. Story 8. He was the hardest partying dude I knew. We had known each other for years and had been flirty for most of that. We would make out when drunk, then go and pursue other people. I heard that he wanted more, but life got in the way, for years, mostly in the form of a newfound partner who entered my life. At the time, I was relieved, as I did not want anything more from him. Frankly, I never really took him seriously. Then I got dumped out of nowhere. He popped up and made sure I was okay. He listened to me rant and curse out my now ex, whenever I needed it, for weeks. He was so caring and concerned, and unhorny, it shocked me. A few months passed, and I got back on my feet. He approached me at a party and asked me out. No flirting, he just properly asked me out. I still did not want more from him, but I said yes because saying no would have crushed him. I figured the date would be a crash landing. A realization that the woman he had been chasing on and off for 5 years was just a basic person. We went on that date, and for the first time ever we actually talked properly, without alcohol impeding us and without trying to keep it light or be fun. I mean, beyond wanting to be fun in the context of our dinner date. That is when I found out about his past. I will spare you the gory details, but he survived a car crash that killed half his family when he was a child. It left him with mild brain damage that made him a bit dotty and made his dyslexia worse. He was told, every day of his childhood, that he was too stupid to amount to anything. A fact he bookended by mentioning that for 20 years he worked dead-end jobs, ate like a pauper, drank nothing but bottom-shelf alcohol, and dressed almost in rags, all so he could save up to go to college. His first semester was due to start in a few weeks, but he was too embarrassed to talk about going to college at nearly 40. By the end of our date, I saw him in a different light. I saw a man who had turned the dismissiveness that an ignorant world, including me, had heaped on him into something beautiful. He refused to become bitter or hateful. I do not understand how or why. It is a miracle all on its own. I saw a man who was not stupid, but a man who had been let down by the education system and had not been able to enjoy the same benefits from academia that billions of people take for granted. I saw a man who, under the exterior of cheap booze and hand-rolled cigarettes, just wanted to prove himself to the world, despite staggering odds. By the end of our second date, which I agreed to the instant he proposed it, I knew I had found a good person. Again, he surprised me, this time with his creative mind. We invented identities for and role-played as aliens from the planet Gliese 6, just a goof that we took as far as we could, and he kept up with me at every beat, something I would not have thought him capable of in a million years just a month prior. I already knew he was a nerd of similar caliber to me, but we spent that night swapping in-depth likes and dislikes, and to my delight, he ticked every box for me, and vice versa. Except Gordon Ramsay, sorry, not my thing. By the end of the third date, I realized he was the calmest, most considerate, most thoughtful person I had ever met. I had spent most of the preceding 2 decades looking after people, from partners to terminally ill family members, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, he made me feel safe and looked after. By the end of the fourth date, I had fallen in love with him, like a moon-eyed teenager. If someone could bottle the feeling I had when I fell asleep on his chest, his fingers in my hair, they would make trillions. He made me feel invincible. We said those 3 little words on our 6th date. I said it first. I could not help myself. 2 months earlier, he was just the slightly weird guy who was at every party, to me. At the time of writing, we have been together for a year. He is on track for a grade point average of 3.7, and I have never known love like it. I literally have no complaints. I am proud of him, I am proud to be with him, and I am excited to take on the future with him by my side. For his part, he loves me just as much as I love him, and seems to be in genuine awe of me as a person. I have no idea why, but I am not questioning it. Edit. Made some tweaks to the text. No, our relationship is not centered around alcohol. I just knew him mostly from parties and nights out. Yes, I buy him decent beer now. He still gets excited when I find something new, and it is truly adorable. Story 9. I'll never forget those moments when my parents opened up to me about their difficulties in their younger years. It made me really see why they act the way they do and feel much more empathetic towards them. I truly believe every parent should open up to their children about how they feel, at least when the children are at a good age to understand it. Essay 25. Story 10. I realized that because I hadn't been taking care of myself, standing up for myself, or listening to my own body, I found myself being a pretty judgmental person when in the past I was welcoming and helpful towards others instead. I am working on changing that now, being kinder to myself and others around me now. Story 11. My bully ended up being my maid of honor. It's about 15 years of elapsed time that led from one to the other, but one day in high school she sat down next to me, needing to get something out of her system, and told me about her life. I'll chat with any person, particularly if that person intrigues me, which she did. What she told me was really, truly bad and made me view her in an entirely different light. It was a lesson in the judgments I made in my early teens on the basis of rumors and peer pressure. She became my friend, my parents became like surrogate parents to her, and over time she became a sister to me. I adore her. Story 12. About 6 months after separating from my ex-wife, my new girlfriend, who is black, started receiving extremely racist text messages from spoofed phone numbers. These were clearly from my ex based on the way she said certain things, like calling members of my family by nicknames only people very close would know, and saying things like, "I'll get my husband back." I changed my account information and my girlfriend changed her number, and the harassment stopped. My ex had never said anything overtly racist before, but even if you're just trying to get under someone's skin, using racial slurs and telling people to go back to Africa is pretty awful. Our separation went from amicable on both sides to confrontational overnight. What a piece of trash. Story 13. When I got sober, my then boyfriend, who had tried to convince me prior to this I wasn't an alcoholic, treated me with absolute contempt. He treated me horribly, but I also had codependency issues and a lot of shame and guilt, and tried to make it work. I was not at my best when I was drinking, but it wasn't about that. It was because I wasn't drinking anymore. He would yell at me when I asked him not to drink beer in my condo, sneer at me with derision at what felt like every comment I made, and insult me and my character constantly. He came to me saying he found websites that said alcoholism wasn't a disease, it just showed I was weak. I tearfully asked him why I would ever make a choice that would cause pain in my own and his lives, and he just told me I was pathetic and I'd never stay sober. When I got sober, I asked him what would help him see that I was serious this time, and he said 30 days sober. So when I got my 30-day chip, he took it, said, "What is this? I don't want this," and threw it in the trash. I finally gained a backbone in that moment, and we broke up. Looking back, he wanted me to keep drinking because alcohol was a huge focus in his life. He was also trying to get me to break up with him because he was too cowardly. But the way he treated me in that month, I had zero love for him by the end of it. He was emotionally abusive before, but never like that. Also, I realized he had the personality of a wet tissue and I could do much better. He only had a personality when he drank. Good news is I'm so much stronger and better now than I ever was when I was with him. Story 14. My husband is an engineer. He sees the world in a very black and white way, is extremely matter-of-fact and truth-driven. He doesn't say anything not worth saying. But when we first got together, we lay down to go to bed and we both put our arms under our pillows and bumped elbows accidentally. He immediately responded with, "What's an elbow like you doing under a pillow like this?" And for this straight-faced human to be so quick to joke, I definitely knew I was in for a real treat to see him be silly for the rest of our lives. Story 15. The guy I was dating was talking about his teenage son that lives with his ex, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "He's the team football star," followed by, "He's gonna make me a lot of money." Like what? No mention of how he is a great kid and his academics. Just straight selfish. Story 16. I thought my uncle was a great man, a hard worker, and a happy, fun guy. His ex-wife had full custody and refused to let him see their daughter, but I didn't think anything of it. He seemed like a good man and would cry about missing my cousin. I was told he hit his ex-wife a few times, which led my mom to check on her afterwards. That was the first thing I found out about him. Story 17. In 2011, I found out that a man I was dating was a wanted criminal who had committed several armed robberies throughout the state of California. I only dated him for 3 months before he was arrested. He told me he was a police detective and I believed him. I found out through the news and immediately went to the police. It was one of the worst things that happened to me. Story 18. I have stage 4 cancer, meaning I'm not ever getting better, and recently my roommate accused me of pretending because I happened to have a few good days where I could get things done. She knows that people on chemotherapy have good days and bad days. Her own mother had cancer, but she accused me of faking it. I'm moving out. Story 19. There were 2 memorable ones. An old boyfriend looked me up. We had dated when we were crazy teens, not seriously. He was fun but a drunk. 39, we got back together. He was sober, a dad, a widower, a whole new person. We're married now after nearly 30 happy years. The other was a friend I asked to be a roommate. She turned out to be a terrible drunk who was violent and changed personality after about 11 p.m. I was friends with her for 10 years, but I must have missed a meeting somewhere along the line. I had to move out of my house until I could get her evicted. Story 20. I realized a lot of people were not what I thought when they saw me struggling in life. When it looked like I was somebody, they were nice. When I started isolating due to mental health issues, they thought I was being snobby. The first thought was that I was doing something to them. I was not about to lay out my mental issues, so they did not feel that way. Then when they saw some flaws, they felt they had ammunition to put my snobbish self in my place, rather than realizing, oh, that is why she isolated. So yeah, people are as nuts as I am.